They started calling me the broke failure when I was 25, fresh out of graduate school with a master's degree in library science and a job offer at the local public library making $38,000 a year. To my family, a collection of lawyers, doctors, business owners, and corporate executives, this might as well have been minimum wage. This might as well have been admitting I'd given up on life entirely. A librarian? My Uncle Robert had said at the family 4th of July barbecue that year, loud enough for everyone to hear, his voice carrying that particular tone of disbelief mixed with pity. You spent 6 years in college to become a librarian? What's that pay? Like 30 grand? 40 if you're lucky? 38,000, I'd said quietly, and the number had hung in the air like an admission of guilt. Quote, "1.4." That was my older brother Trevor, shaking his head like I just told him I'd decided to join a cult. Quote 5. My sister Vanessa had laughed, that particular high-pitched laugh she used when she wanted everyone to know she found something ridiculous. Quote 6. Quote 7. I'd said, but my voice had been too quiet, too defensive, and nobody had been listening anyway. That was 12 years ago. 12 years of being the family joke. 12 years of showing up to holidays and weddings and family gatherings where everyone had a story about their latest promotion or their new house or their exotic vacation, and I sat in the corner nursing a beer and hoping nobody would ask what I'd been up to lately, because what was I up to? I was working at the library. Still, I'd become the head of the Adult Services Department, which sounded impressive until you realized it meant I made $52,000 a year and supervised 3 other librarians in a building that was perpetually underfunded and understaffed. I lived in a small 2-bedroom house I'd bought for $140,000 in a neighborhood my family wouldn't visit after dark. I drove a 10-year-old Honda Civic that had 180,000 miles on it and a check engine light that had been on for the past 6 months. I shopped at discount grocery stores and wore clothes from Target and took my vacations at state parks because I couldn't afford anything else. By my family's standards, I was a complete failure, and they made sure I never forgot it. Still at the library, my cousin Jessica would ask every single time she saw me, as if she thought maybe I'd quit and gotten a real job since the last family gathering 3 months ago. Quote 9. Quote 10. My brother-in-law Chad would joke, and everyone would laugh except me. Quote 11. My Aunt Patricia had said at last year's Christmas dinner, loudly enough that the entire table could hear, "With everything going digital, who needs libraries anymore? You should probably start thinking about a career change before you get laid off." I'd tried to explain that libraries were more relevant than ever, that they provided internet access to people who couldn't afford it, literacy programs, job search assistance, community spaces, resources for homeless populations. But nobody had been interested in hearing about the actual work I did. They'd already decided that my job was a waste, that I was a waste, that I'd somehow failed at the basic task of being successful enough to be respected. The worst part was the exclusions. I wasn't invited to my cousin David's destination wedding in Cabo because it's pretty expensive and we figured you couldn't afford it. I wasn't included in the family investment group my Uncle Robert had started because on Awuchan, quote, 14, I wasn't asked to join my siblings for their annual ski trip to Colorado because it's like $3,000 per person and we didn't want to make you feel bad about not being able to come. They made decisions about my life without asking me, assumed my financial situation, excluded me preemptively to save me the embarrassment of having to decline, and then acted like they were doing me a favor. The only person who never treated me like a failure was my grandfather, William Morrison. Grandpa had been a farmer his whole life, owned 200 acres about an hour outside the city, grew corn and soybeans, raised cattle, lived in the same farmhouse his parents had built in 1947. He was 78 when I finished graduate school, still living alone on the farm after my grandmother died, still working the land even though everyone told him he should sell and move to a retirement community. I'd started visiting him every Sunday when I got the library job, not because I expected anything from him, not because I was trying to butter him up or position myself for an inheritance, but because he was lonely, and I was lonely, and we were the only 2 people in the family who seemed to understand that there were more important things in life than money and status. Every Sunday for 12 years, I'd drive out to the farm. We'd have coffee together on the front porch, overlooking the fields. We'd work on projects, fixing the barn roof, building new shelves for his workshop, organizing the decades of accumulated stuff in the attic. We'd talk about books. Grandpa loved westerns and historical fiction, and I'd bring him new releases from the library. We'd play chess. We'd cook simple meals together. We'd just exist in each other's company without judgment or expectation. "You're a good man, Marcus," Grandpa had told me countless times over the years. Don't let them make you think otherwise. You help people, you make the world a little better. That's worth more than any salary. Before we get into it, don't forget to like and subscribe, and hit hype to boost this episode. Drop a comment below with your city or country. I'm always curious where viewers are joining from. Sometimes I think they're right, though, I'd admitted once, during a particularly low period when I'd been passed over for a promotion at the library. Sometimes I think I did make the wrong choice, that I should have gone to law school like Trevor or business school like Vanessa, that I should have prioritized making money. Why? Grandpa had asked simply. So you could be miserable like they are? So you could spend your life chasing more and more money while never having time to enjoy it? So you could look down on people the way they look down on you? They're not miserable. They have nice houses and new cars, and they're drowning in debt, Grandpa had interrupted. Every single one of them. Your Uncle Robert took out a second mortgage to buy his boat. Your brother Trevor leases his cars because he can't afford to buy them outright. Your sister, credit card debt up to her eyeballs. They look successful, but they're all one bad month away from financial disaster. You live within your means. You own your house outright. You have savings. You have peace of mind. That's real success. I hadn't realized until much later how much Grandpa knew about the family's finances, how much he'd been paying attention to who was living authentically versus who was performing success. The family had stopped visiting Grandpa regularly about 5 years ago. They'd gotten too busy, too important, too caught up in their own lives. Thanksgiving and Christmas, if they remembered. Maybe his birthday, but the weekly visits, the casual drop-ins, the real relationship building, that had all fallen away. Why don't you move closer to town? My Uncle Robert had said to Grandpa at Thanksgiving 3 years ago. Sell the farm, buy a condo near us. Then we could see you more often. What he'd really meant was, we don't want to drive an hour to visit you, so you should move closer to make it more convenient for us. Grandpa had declined. I like my farm, I like my space, and Marcus visits me every week, so I'm not lonely. Marcus, my Aunt Patricia had said dismissively, like my name was synonymous with irrelevance. Well, Marcus doesn't have anything better to do with his Sundays, but I did have other things I could have done. I could have slept in, could have run errands, could have pursued hobbies or dated or done any number of things with my limited free time, but I chose to spend it with Grandpa because I loved him and because those Sunday mornings were the best part of my week. The family had no idea. They'd written me off as the family failure, and they'd written off my relationship with Grandpa as meaningless because I was meaningless. They couldn't imagine that those weekly visits mattered, that they'd been building something that would eventually mean everything. Grandpa died on a Tuesday in late September. Heart attack, sudden and massive. He'd been working in the barn, doing the evening feeding, when it happened. One of his neighbors had found him an hour later and called 911, but by then it was too late. I got the call at work, my mother's voice on the other end, tight and strange. Marcus, your grandfather passed away. This afternoon. Heart attack. I'd felt the world tilt, felt my chest constrict, felt tears burning behind my eyes. Quote 31. Quote 32. She'd paused, then added in a tone that suggested she thought she was being generous. I know you two were close. I'm sorry. Close. Such an inadequate word for what Grandpa had meant to me. For 12 years of Sunday mornings, for hundreds of hours of conversation and companionship and unconditional acceptance, for being the one person in my family who valued me for who I was rather than for what I earned. I'd left work early, driven out to the farm even though I knew Grandpa wouldn't be there, sat on the front porch where we'd spent so many mornings drinking coffee and watching the sun rise over the fields, and I'd cried harder than I'd cried since my grandmother's funeral, harder than I'd cried since I was a child, because I'd lost the one person who'd really known me. The funeral was Saturday. The family had planned everything without consulting me. They never consulted me about anything important. My mother had chosen the casket, the flowers, the program. My Uncle Robert had written the obituary. Trevor had organized the reception afterward. I'd shown up in my best suit, which was still noticeably cheaper than everyone else's suits, and sat in the second row and listened to people give eulogies about a man they'd barely seen in the past 5 years. Dad was a pillar of the community, my Uncle Robert had said from the pulpit, his voice trembling with what I was pretty sure was performed emotion rather than real grief. A hard worker, a family man, someone who taught us the value of dedication and perseverance. He'd visited Grandpa maybe 3 times in the past 2 years. Quote 36. My cousin David had said, wearing an expensive suit and a somber expression. Quote 37. David hadn't visited Grandpa once in the past 4 years, My sister Vanessa had cried through her entire eulogy about how much she'd loved Grandpa, how she wished she'd had more time with him, how she regretted not visiting more often. Real tears, real emotion. But the regret was for herself, not for Grandpa. She was mourning the relationship she could have had, not the relationship she'd actually built. I hadn't given a eulogy. Nobody had asked me to. I was the broke failure, the family joke. What would I have to say that anyone would want to hear? After the service, during the reception at my parents' house, I'd overheard conversations that made my stomach turn. "So, when's the will reading?" My cousin Jessica had asked my Uncle Robert, not even bothering to lower her voice. "Next Tuesday. Attorney's office at 10 a.m. "Do we know what's in it? Did Dad ever talk to you about his estate?" "He mentioned investments. Said he'd been more careful with money than we realized. I'm guessing there's at least $1 million, probably more. The farm itself is worth $500,000 easily, maybe $800,000 if we can find the right buyer." Jesus, so we're looking at substantial inheritances. We'll see how it's divided. But yeah, should be significant. They were literally standing in my parents' living room, eating funeral reception food, discussing how much money they were about to receive. Grandpa had been in the ground for less than 3 hours. My brother Trevor and his wife were having a similar conversation in the kitchen. Quote 44. Trevor's wife Amanda was saying. Or maybe a down payment on a vacation house. We've been looking at properties in the mountains. Let's see how much it is first, Trevor interrupted. But yeah, this could be the windfall we need. Finally pay off some debt, upgrade the cars, maybe take that European vacation we've been talking about. "Do you think he left anything to Marcus?" Amanda had asked, and there'd been genuine confusion in her voice, like the idea hadn't occurred to her until that moment. Trevor had laughed. Actually laughed. "Marcus? Why would he leave anything to Marcus? I mean, maybe a token amount, maybe like 10 grand or something so Marcus can fix his car. But the real money? That'll go to the people who can actually do something useful with it." I'd left shortly after that. Went home to my small house and my old car and my cheap furniture and wondered what Grandpa would have thought about his children and grandchildren circling his estate like vultures before they'd even finished mourning him. The will reading was scheduled for the following Tuesday at 10 a.m. I almost didn't go. The attorney had sent a notification saying my presence was requested, but I'd assumed that was just a formality. I'd assumed I'd show up, hear that I'd been left some small token amount, if anything, watch the rest of the family divide up the real assets, and then go back to work. But something made me go. Maybe curiosity, maybe a sense of duty, maybe the hope that Grandpa had left some message for me, some final acknowledgement of our relationship. The attorney's office was in a building downtown, all glass and steel and expensive-looking furniture. The kind of place that charged $500 an hour and made you feel like you couldn't afford to breathe the air. I'd arrived exactly at 10 a.m., wearing the same suit I'd worn to the funeral because it was my only suit, and found the waiting room already packed with family members. My Uncle Robert was there with his wife Diane, my Aunt Patricia with her husband George, my mother and father, Trevor and Amanda, Vanessa and Chad, David and Jessica and their spouses, various other cousins I saw once or twice a year, 23 people total, all of them dressed in expensive clothes, all of them trying to look appropriately solemn while barely containing their anticipation. The only empty chair was in the back corner. I took it without greeting anyone. Nobody greeted me either. I was invisible, as always. The broke failure who'd probably been left nothing and was only there because the attorney had to invite the whole family for legal reasons. I heard my cousin David whispering to his wife, "I'm thinking we use our share as a down payment on the bigger house. The one we looked at last month in Wellington Estates. We've been waiting for something like this." My Aunt Patricia was writing something in a notebook. Probably calculations, probably figuring out how she'd spend money she didn't have yet. Trevor was on his phone, texting someone. I saw him type, "Should know in about 30 minutes. I'm guessing at least $100K, maybe more. Depends on how it's divided." At exactly 10:15, the attorney's assistant, a woman in her 50s with glasses and an expression that suggested she'd seen this scenario play out many times before, appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Morrison's family, we're ready for you now." We filed into a large conference room with a table that could seat 30 people, windows overlooking the city, leather chairs, water bottles at each seat. The attorney, a man in his 60s named Richard Chen, according to the nameplate on the table, stood at the head, holding a leather folder that presumably contained Grandpa's will. Everyone fought for the seats closest to the front. I ended up in the back again, which was fine. I could see and hear everything from there, and I didn't want to be any closer to the circus that was about to unfold. Mr. Chen waited until everyone was seated and settled, then he cleared his throat. "Thank you all for coming. I'm Richard Chen. and I had the privilege of serving as William Morrison's attorney for the past 15 years. I've asked you here for the reading of his last will and testament, which was updated and finalized 6 months ago. 6 months ago. Grandpa had known he was dying, or at least had known he wanted everything in order. Before I begin reading the formal document, Mr. Chen continued, I want to acknowledge that this may be an emotional experience for some of you. William spoke very fondly of his family, and he put considerable thought into these decisions. My Uncle Robert nodded solemnly, like he was already accepting the weight of his expected inheritance with appropriate gravity. Mr. Chen opened the folder and pulled out several documents. I'll start with the formal language of the will, and then I'll break down the specific bequests. Please hold all questions until the end. He put on reading glasses and began. I, William James Morrison, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament, revoking all previous wills and codicils. Standard legal language that nobody really listened to. People were shifting in their seats, pulling out phones to surreptitiously check messages, waiting for the real information. Then Mr. Chen reached the relevant section. To my beloved family, I leave the following. After careful consideration and reflection on my relationships with each of you, I have decided to leave the entirety of my estate, including my farm, all property and possessions, all bank accounts and investments, and all other assets of any kind, to the one family member who stood by me when others were too busy, to the one who showed up week after week, year after year, without expectation of reward, to the one who valued me as a person rather than as a future inheritance. The room had gone completely silent. Everyone was leaning forward now, all attention focused on Mr. Chen. Everything goes to the one who stood by me. The silence stretched for a long moment. Then chaos erupted. That's me, my Aunt Patricia said immediately, standing up so fast her chair screeched against the floor. I was always close to Dad. I was his little girl. I called him every week. Well, almost every week. I sent him cards on every holiday. I helped him after Mom died, made sure he had food in the house, that he wasn't alone. You called once a month, if that, my Uncle Robert interrupted, also standing, his face already flushing with anger. And you helped him for about 3 months after Mom died and then disappeared for 4 years. I was the one who handled his finances, who made sure he was taken care of financially, who gave him advice about managing his assets. You tried to get him to sell the farm so you could take a commission as his real estate broker, Patricia shot back, her voice rising to a pitch that made several people wince. You weren't helping him. You were trying to profit off him. Every conversation was about liquidating assets and putting money in mutual funds you happened to manage. You were building your own portfolio, not helping Dad. That's a lie. I was trying to help him secure his future. He was 78 years old. What future? You wanted him to sell the land his parents left him so you could make money off the sale. I visited him all the time. That was my cousin David, also standing now, apparently deciding that volume and conviction would somehow make his claim more legitimate. I was just there last month. We had dinner together, we talked about his health, I made sure he was doing okay. Once in the past year, Trevor muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. You visited once in 12 months, and now you're claiming you were attentive? Well, you never visited either, David whirled on Trevor, pointing an accusing finger. You were too busy with your fancy job and your expensive lifestyle to drive an hour to see your own grandfather. I was busy with work. I have responsibilities. But I sent him cards on his birthday and Christmas. I called him on Father's Day. I made sure he knew I was thinking about him even when I couldn't be there physically. Cards? My mother's voice cut through the argument, shrill with indignation and disbelief. Quote 76. Quote 77. Robert said, his voice booming now, filling the conference room. Quote 78. Quote 79. Patricia interrupted, her laugh bitter and mocking. Quote Deet. Quote 81. Robert roared. Quote 82. Quote 83. My cousin Jessica chimed in, standing now, her voice desperate and pleading. Quote 84. Quote 85. Trevor pointed out. Quote 86. Quote 87. Quote 88. Robert said coldly. Quote 89. Quote 90. Quote 91. That was my brother-in-law Chad, apparently deciding to insert himself into the family drama. Quote 92. Quote 93, said my cousin David's wife. This is clearly open to interpretation. Mr. Chen, you're an attorney. You must see that this language is problematic. How are you supposed to determine who William meant? We'll need to bring in witnesses, testimony, documentation of everyone's relationship with William. Or we could just split it evenly, Vanessa interjected, her voice taking on that reasonable, let's all be adults tone she used when she wanted to sound sensible. Quote 96. Quote 97, Robert said immediately. Quote 98. Quote 99, Trevor said. Quote 100. Quote 1001. Patricia said. Quote 102. Quote 103. David shot back. Quote 104. Quote 105. Quote 106. The arguing intensified exponentially, everyone talking over each other, voices rising, accusations flying across the table. My Uncle Robert was red-faced and gesturing wildly, his finger jabbing at various family members as he made points nobody was listening to. My Aunt Patricia was crying while simultaneously shouting, tears streaming down her face even as she hurled insults. My cousins were forming alliances, some supporting Robert's claim as oldest child, others arguing that Patricia had been more emotionally invested, still others insisting that the grandchildren deserved equal consideration, a few people trying to advocate for an even split that would prevent litigation. Someone knocked over a water glass and it shattered on the floor, and nobody even paused in their argument to acknowledge it. Someone else's phone started ringing, and they answered it mid-shout. Lishattu quote 107 Lin. My mother had her head in her hands, whether from grief or frustration I couldn't tell. My father was trying to mediate between Robert and Patricia, his voice getting louder and louder as he tried to be heard over the chaos. Maybe we should consider what Dad would actually want. That was my mother, finally looking up, her voice cutting through some of the noise. Maybe instead of fighting over money, we should think about what he valued, what he cared about, who actually made him happy. He valued family, Patricia said immediately. He valued all of us. That's why this is so hard to figure out. He loved all of us equally. Did he, though? That was Trevor, and something in his tone made several people stop and look at him. Did he actually love all of us equally? Or have we all been telling ourselves that because it makes us feel better about not visiting? What are you saying? Robert demanded. I'm saying maybe we should be honest about who actually showed up, who actually spent time with Grandpa in his last years. Because I know it wasn't me. I visited maybe twice a year, and both times I spent most of the visit checking my phone and thinking about work. I didn't actually connect with him. I didn't actually ask how he was doing. I just showed up, paid my respects, and left. We were busy, Patricia started. We were always busy, Trevor interrupted. We always had excuses. Work was demanding, kids had activities, we had other plans. There was always something more important than driving an hour to spend time with an old man who'd already heard all our stories. And maybe that's fine. Maybe that's just how modern families work. But let's not pretend we all stood by him. Let's not pretend we were all equally attentive. The room had gone quieter now, people looking uncomfortable, shifting in their seats. So who did stand by him then? David asked, and his voice had lost some of its aggressive certainty. If it wasn't any of us, then who? Did he have some secret friend we don't know about? Some neighbor who visited constantly? Or maybe, said a voice from the back, he meant exactly what he said. Everyone turned to look at Mr. Chen, who'd been watching this circus unfold with the patience of someone who'd seen this exact scenario play out dozens of times before. Mr. Chen let them argue for a full minute before he picked up a small gavel and rapped it sharply against the table 3 times. That's enough, he said, his voice cutting through the chaos with practiced authority. If you cannot control yourselves, I will ask you to leave and conduct the rest of this reading with only the relevant parties present. The room quieted, but the tension remained thick. Everyone was looking at each other suspiciously, calculatingly, trying to figure out who Grandpa had meant, trying to determine which of them could claim to have stood by him most convincingly. William anticipated this reaction, Mr. Chen continued, which is why he prepared a supplementary letter to be read after the formal will. This letter clarifies his intentions and identifies the beneficiary. He pulled out a second document, this one handwritten on lined paper, Grandpa's distinctive scrawl immediately recognizable. Quote, 128. Mr. Chen said. Quote, 129. He began to read. Quote, 130. Mr. Chen set down the letter. The room was dead silent. Every single person was staring at me. I felt like I couldn't breathe, like the world had tilted and I was falling. Grandpa had left me everything. Everything. The farm, the house, the money. All of it was mine. Marcus Morrison, Mr. Chen said, looking directly at me. Would you please stand? I stood on shaking legs, my hands gripping the back of the chair in front of me for support. Your grandfather's estate has been fully appraised, Mr. Chen continued. The farm and property are valued at approximately $850,000. The house and its contents are valued at an additional $120,000. Mr. Morrison maintained several investment accounts and savings accounts that total $1.4 million. His life insurance policy names you as the sole beneficiary and will pay out $500,000. He also maintained a 15% ownership stake in Morrison Agricultural Supply, a farm equipment company he co-founded 40 years ago, which generates approximately $75,000 in annual dividends and has a current market value of roughly $300,000. He paused to let those numbers sink in. The total value of your inheritance is approximately $3.2 million. The silence was absolute. I could hear my own heart pounding, could hear someone's phone buzzing with notifications, could hear the HVAC system humming overhead. $3.2 million. The broke failure had just inherited more money than my entire family made in a year combined. The explosion of noise that followed Mr. Chen's announcement was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Multiple people shouting at once, chairs scraping back, someone's water bottle clattering to the floor. This is bullshit. Trevor was on his feet, his face purple with rage. Complete and utter bullshit. Marcus did nothing. He didn't help with finances or legal matters, or... He showed up, Mr. Chen interrupted calmly. Every week for 12 years. According to Mr. Morrison's detailed journals, Marcus visited every Sunday without fail. Can any of you say the same? We had lives, my Aunt Patricia shrieked. We had jobs and families and responsibilities. We couldn't just drop everything every weekend to drive an hour out to some farm in the middle of nowhere. And yet Marcus managed to do exactly that while working full-time and earning significantly less than any of you, Mr. Chen observed. This is undue influence. My Uncle Robert was pulling out his phone, presumably to call his lawyer. Marcus manipulated a vulnerable old man, isolated him from his family, poisoned him against us. Mr. Morrison was evaluated by 2 independent physicians 6 months ago, Mr. Chen said, his tone suggesting he'd been through this type of challenge before and wasn't impressed. Both certified him as being of completely sound mind. He was not isolated. You all knew where he lived and were welcome to visit any time. And the weekly visits were initiated by Marcus 12 years ago when Mr. Morrison was 78 and in perfect health, hardly vulnerable. We're contesting this, Robert said flatly. We'll sue. We'll drag this out as long as we have to. You can certainly try, Mr. Chen replied. But I should inform you that Mr. Morrison anticipated exactly this reaction. He kept detailed journals documenting every visitor, every phone call, every interaction with family members. He also recorded several video messages explaining his reasoning, all of them witnessed and notarized. Any legal challenge will be expensive, time-consuming, and ultimately unsuccessful. I don't care, Robert said. This is not right. This is not fair. Marcus deserves exactly what he's getting, a voice said from the corner. It was my mother, and she was crying, but her voice was steady. Dad was right about all of it. We did abandon him. We did get too busy and too important to visit. And Marcus showed up. For 12 years. Oh, so you're siding with Marcus now? Patricia whirled on her. Your own siblings mean nothing? Your nieces and nephews mean nothing? I'm not siding with anyone. I'm acknowledging reality. My mother looked at me, really looked at me, maybe for the first time in years. I'm sorry, Marcus, for treating you like you didn't matter, for calling you a failure, for not seeing what was right in front of me. This is insane, Vanessa said, her voice high and strained. Marcus, you can't actually think you deserve all this. You have to share it. You have to split it with the family. That's what Grandpa would have wanted. Grandpa explicitly stated what he wanted, I said, finding my voice finally. He wanted me to have it. All of it. Because I showed up. Because I cared about him as a person and not as a bank account. You're really going to do this? Trevor moved toward me, his expression ugly. You're really going to take everything and leave your own family with nothing? You're really going to stand there and tell me I don't deserve what Grandpa left me? I shot back. After 12 years of driving out to that farm every Sunday, after hundreds of hours of companionship, after being the only person who actually gave a damn whether he was lonely or needed help, or just wanted someone to talk to. You were buttering him up, David shouted. You were positioning yourself for exactly this. Don't act like you're some kind of saint. You played the long game and it paid off. Is that what you think? I looked around the room at all of them, these people I'd known my entire life, these people who'd spent years making me feel worthless. You think I spent 12 years visiting my grandfather, listening to his stories, helping him with projects, building a genuine relationship. You think I did all of that just to get his money? Yes, multiple people shouted simultaneously. Then you don't know me at all, I said quietly. I visited Grandpa because I loved him, because he was the only person in this family who treated me like I mattered, because those Sunday mornings were the best part of my week. I never asked him about his finances, never discussed inheritance, never even thought about it, because I wasn't there for his money. I was there for him. Bullshit, Trevor said flatly. Mr. Chen rapped his gavel again. I think we're done here. Mr. Morrison, Marcus, I'll need you to stay so we can go over some paperwork. The rest of you are free to leave. If you wish to contest the will, have your attorneys contact my office. But I strongly advise against it. You will lose, and you'll waste a lot of money in the process. Nobody moved for a long moment. Then my Uncle Robert turned and walked out without another word, his wife scrambling to follow him. Patricia was next, shooting me a look of pure hatred, David and Jessica whispering furiously to each other. One by one, they filtered out, some angry, some crying, some just stunned. My mother lingered by the door. Marcus, can we talk? I don't think there's anything to talk about right now, Mom. I really am sorry for how we treated you, for not seeing. I need some time. She nodded and left. Soon it was just me, Mr. Chen, and his assistant in the conference room. That went about as expected, Mr. Chen said dryly. Your grandfather predicted almost exactly how they'd react. He had a gift for reading people. He did. Are you all right? That was a lot to process. I sat down heavily in the nearest chair. I don't know what I am. This doesn't feel real. It's very real. He pulled out another folder, this one significantly thicker. We have quite a bit of paperwork to go through. The estate will need to go through probate, but that's mostly a formality given how clear-cut the will is. You'll have access to most of the funds within 3 to 4 months. The farm and house can be transferred immediately. I don't know what to do with the farm. Your grandfather has had the same tenant farmer working the land for the past 5 years, a man named Jack Hewitt. He has a lease that runs through next year, pays fair market rate for the acreage. If you want to continue that arrangement, you can. If you want to work the farm yourself, Mr. Hewitt has indicated he'd be happy to teach you. If you want to sell, I can recommend excellent realtors who specialize in agricultural property. I need time to think about all this. Of course, there's no rush. He handed me a key ring. These are the keys to the house and all the outbuildings. Your grandfather wanted you to have them immediately. He said, and I quote, Marcus should go home as soon as possible. It's his home now. I took the keys, feeling their weight. The broke failure was now the owner of a 200-acre farm. The family joke had just inherited $3.2 million. The person they'd dismissed and excluded for years now had more money than any of them. It should have felt like victory, like vindication, like proof that I'd been right all along. Instead, it just felt sad. Sad that Grandpa was gone. Sad that it had taken his death for the family to show their true colors so blatantly. Sad that money was the only thing they'd ever cared about. I left Mr. Chen's office through a side exit to avoid any family members who might be lingering in the lobby. My phone had already started buzzing with messages, dozens of them, from people I'd barely heard from in years, people who'd never bothered to text me before, people who suddenly wanted to reconnect and catch up, now that I was worth $3.2 million. I didn't read any of them, just got in my old Honda Civic with its check engine light and drove. I didn't go to my house. I went to Grandpa's. The drive took about an hour, like it always had, past the city limits, through increasingly rural areas, past farm fields and small towns, until I reached the familiar turnoff to Morrison Road. The gravel driveway stretched for a quarter mile from the main road to the house, lined with oak trees Grandpa's father had planted in the 1950s. The house came into view, a 2-story farmhouse with white siding and a wraparound porch, built in 1947 by Grandpa's parents. It looked exactly the same as it always had, the porch swing where we'd spent countless Sunday mornings, the weather vane on top of the barn, the garden plot where Grandpa had grown tomatoes and peppers and beans every summer. It looked like home. I parked and sat in my car for a long moment, trying to process everything. This was mine now. All of it. The house, the land, the buildings, everything. I got out and walked to the porch, using one of the keys Mr. Chen had given me to unlock the front door. The house smelled like Grandpa, a coffee and Old Spice aftershave and wood smoke from the fireplace. His reading glasses were on the table next to his chair, his coffee mug in the sink, a book open and face down on the arm of the couch, marking his place in a Louis L'Amour novel he'd never finish. I walked through the house slowly, taking it all in. The kitchen where we'd made countless Sunday breakfasts together. The living room where we'd played chess and watched old westerns. The study with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves full of paperbacks and hardcovers and photo albums. The spare bedroom where I'd sometimes stayed over when the weather was bad or when we'd worked late on projects. Everything was the same. Everything was different. I found a manila envelope on the kitchen table with my name on it in Grandpa's handwriting. Inside was a letter. Quote 194. I sat at the kitchen table and cried. Really cried, for the first time since I'd gotten the news that Grandpa had died. Cried for losing him. Cried for the weight of what he'd given me. Cried for everything I'd been carrying for years. The judgment, the dismissal, the feeling of never being good enough. And then I cried because someone had seen me, really seen me, had valued me enough to not just tell me I mattered, but to prove it in the most tangible way possible. My phone buzzed again. More messages from family members. I finally looked at a few of them. Trevor. Marcus, we need to talk. This whole situation has gotten out of hand. Let's figure out a fair solution for everyone. Vanessa. I know you're hurt about how we treated you, but keeping everything is just going to tear the family apart. Please consider sharing. Uncle Robert. I'm prepared to take legal action. Contest the will, prove undue influence, but it doesn't have to come to that. We can settle this privately if you're reasonable. Cousin David. Dude, seriously? You're really going to screw over the whole family like this, after everything we've been through together? The audacity was stunning. They'd spent years treating me like I didn't matter, and now they thought I owed them something. Now they thought we were close enough that I should consider their feelings. I deleted the messages without responding. Then I looked around the kitchen, my kitchen now, and thought about what came next. I took a week off work, used vacation days I'd been hoarding for years because I never had anywhere to go or money to travel. Spent that week at the farm, going through Grandpa's things, meeting with Mr. Chen to finalize paperwork, talking to Jack Hewitt about the farming operation, just existing in the space that was now mine. Jack turned out to be a good guy in his mid-50s who'd been farming his whole life. He'd been renting Grandpa's land for 5 years, growing corn and soybeans, and he'd clearly respected Grandpa a great deal. Your grandpa was a good man, Jack said when we met to discuss the lease. Fair, honest, never tried to squeeze extra money out of me when crop prices were good. I'd like to continue the arrangement if you're willing, but I understand if you want to make changes. I don't know anything about farming, I admitted. I'm a librarian. Nothing wrong with that. Library helped my daughter through some tough times in high school. You do important work? He paused. Your grandpa talked about you a lot. Said you were the only family member worth a damn. Said you chose to help people instead of chasing money, and that made you smarter than all the rest of them put together. He said that? He did. Was real proud of you. Used to show me the books you'd bring him, tell me about your conversations. He valued those Sundays more than anything. We agreed to continue the lease as it was. Jack would keep farming the land, paying me $30,000 a year in rent, and I'd stay out of his way. It was easy money for me and stability for him. I also met with a financial advisor Mr. Chen recommended, a woman named Sarah Chen, no relation, who specialized in helping people who'd come into unexpected wealth. First thing, she said at our initial meeting, don't tell anyone how much you inherited. You've already got family members crawling out of the woodwork. It'll only get worse if people know the exact numbers. Too late for that. The whole family was at the will reading. Then don't tell anyone else. Friends, coworkers, acquaintances, nobody needs to know your financial situation. She pulled out a notepad. Second thing, we need to talk about your goals. What do you want this money to do for you? I thought about Grandpa's letter, about freedom, about being able to continue being who I was without financial stress. Shot, quote, 212, I said. Quote, 213. Quote, 214. Quote, 215. We spent 2 hours going over strategies. She recommended setting up a trust for most of the inheritance, paying off all my debts, investing conservatively for long-term growth, and giving myself a modest annual income supplement that would make life comfortable without dramatically changing my lifestyle. Quote, 216, Sarah told me. Quote, 217. Quote, 218, I said honestly. Quote, 219. Quote, 221. Back at work the following Monday, I didn't tell anyone about the inheritance. Just said my grandfather had passed away and I'd needed some time to handle the estate. My coworkers were kind and supportive, brought me casseroles and cards, asked if I needed anything. Nobody treated me differently. Nobody looked at me like I'd changed. I was still Marcus the librarian. Marcus who helped patrons find books and troubleshoot computer problems and organized reading programs for kids. And I realized that's exactly what I wanted to be. The family harassment continued for weeks. Phone calls I didn't answer, text messages I deleted. A few of them even showed up at my house demanding to talk, demanding that I do the right thing and share the inheritance. My Uncle Robert made good on his threat to contest the will. His lawyer filed paperwork alleging undue influence and manipulation. Mr. Chen had been right. It went nowhere. The judge looked at Grandpa's journals, watched the video messages Grandpa had recorded, heard testimony from Grandpa's doctors and neighbors, and dismissed the case within 3 months. Robert was ordered to pay my legal fees. Gradually, most of the family stopped trying. They realized I wasn't going to budge, wasn't going to share, wasn't going to feel guilty for accepting what Grandpa had explicitly wanted me to have. A few of them, my mother surprisingly, and my cousin Jessica, actually apologized for real. Not the checked, quote, tu odd kind of apology, but genuine acknowledgement of how they treated me, genuine regret for their behavior. I've been thinking a lot about what Dad said in his letter, my mother told me 6 months after the funeral. We were having coffee at a neutral location, the first time we'd really talked since the will reading. Quote, 224. Quote, 225. Quote, 26. Quote, 227. I admitted. Quote, 228. Quote, 29. It wasn't enough to fix 12 years of hurt, but it was a start. Trevor and Vanessa never apologized. We simply stopped talking. They'd made their choice about what mattered to them, and I'd made mine.